Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast that's all about other podcasts. Every single week, we discuss and have a book club style discussion about a podcast we recommended last week. I'm Kirk.
And I am Zach.
And this week, we are talking about the Speak Up podcast. It's a storytelling podcast. Okay, I keep getting the name wrong, but I got it right. But you gave me the smirk, like, hey, you almost got it wrong. I keep wanting to call it Story Up. I don't know why, but it's not that. It's called Speak Up. It's an amazing show. I actually found it on in Podcast Magazine, which is a fairly new publication, and I started listening to it, and I've listened to 4 or 5 episodes now. Really like it. I am a sucker for, storytelling podcasts. I love good stories, and I really admire storytellers. You guys have heard this a million times, but this is a really good one because it takes kind of a little bit of a different angle, or a more analytical angle on storytelling. It is different
than many of the storytelling podcasts.
The thing that I thought was unique about this show is it's very well produced, and to the point where I could recommend episode 1. Normally, You do not want to recommend an episode 1 for an indie show like this, unless it's like, a This American Life type show. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, or, an NPR.
These major newspapers have put out shows.
Yeah. But
established, like Gimlet, you can listen to episode 1s. It's fine.
But theirs is very well produced, sounds awesome. And they record I think all the stories are recorded live.
At their... Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff about this. So he actually is a storytelling... It's like a workshop. He hosts a workshop that teaches you to be a better storyteller. And are the speak-ups that he's like recording at these workshops? Yeah,
so they're from Hartford, Connecticut. And so all of these workshops are in that area and in the New England area. Mm-hmm. And so that's where they do those things. And then they have essentially public speaking storytelling things that they do after people go through the class, workshop, whatever. And it's really neat. This guy, though, he is his list of things that he's done is a mile long. He's published like 7 books, some of them being like novels. Which some of them are award winning. He's written 2 rock operas. No, 1 rock opera and 3 musicals. Sorry. He's written comic books. He's won. We've talked about The Moth before, and they kind of have almost like a storytelling competition. And he's a 42-time Moth Story Slam champion and a 6-time Grand Slam champion, which I don't know what that means, the Grand Slam.
Maybe it's the champions go for another championship tournament.
Not sure, but it's crazy. And he's been on TV with his story, like PBS Stories from the Stage. He's been on This American Life. He's done a TED Talk. He's been on so many different things with his amazing storytelling. So that's where this is coming from. But he's also like a elementary school teacher. Yeah. At least he was from episode 1. I don't know if he's still doing that.
Yeah, he might have, because he had so many other things going on, he might have moved beyond.
But it's a great show, and I really like the expertise behind it. Mm-hmm. And the episode that we recommended was episode 1 with Chris Kriesen. That was the storyteller, and it was titled I Am Titan.
And yeah, to me, one of the really interesting parts of this show is that it's not just storytelling how you typically see it, because we went and saw the show Risk live. Mm-hmm. We've listened to we've listened to The Moth. We've listened to a lot of these, and a lot of it is just pure, here's storytelling in a great way. And This American Life, in a sense, is the same thing, Snap Judgment. But this one, he brings that expertise of throwing these workshops, and at the end of each episode, he offers kind of critique, some good things about how they told the story, some things that they could potentially do to make the story even better. And so that is an interesting twist on kind of the typical formula for a storytelling podcast.
Yeah, and I want to highlight a little bit of the show that we were the story that was told. But yeah, for sure, I saw the story in a different light, especially the second time I listened through, because I was being able to pick out the things that they highlighted at the end of the story, where they talked about, where he started the story and things like that. Things that I don't think I ever would have really thought about, except for they pointed them out because that's what they do. He's basically a master storyteller, so he knows the formula that makes a good story, or a good story great. Yeah,
absolutely. And it seems like he's given many stories on stage and is very effective at it. So it's interesting to hear somebody who has that as their skill set try to use that to essentially find a new audience and a new place that he can help work on storytelling with a group of people. But yeah, this specific episode is really funny because of the story that's involved, the main story of this episode.
Yeah, and so if you haven't listened to it, here's a little bit of a highlight. This guy, Chris, he was going to go on a hike. It wasn't a hike, a climb, essentially, mountain climbing. And it was a treacherous mountain. He said over 150 people had died doing this climb. Mm-hmm. And it was during the winter, so it was very cold. And he had done this climb before, but not during the winter.
Yeah, apparently that's when it's deadly, because he said he'd done it multiple times when it wasn't winter.
And so I think there was some great self-deprecating humor, because he talked a lot about, I'm a Titan. This is nothing, this is a stepping stone for me to do a much bigger mountain and then make my way to Everest. I am Prometheus. I'm going to steal the fire from the gods. Yeah. So it was like this great buildup of his expertise in climbing.
Yeah. And he literally told the entire climbing group this information. He was like, don't worry, I'm no rookie. I've climbed this mountain many times. And basically was essentially flexing at the beginning of this to a bunch of people who I'm sure just looking at him like, all right, man. It's like, it's good.
Yeah. And of course he talks about searching for the right gear, and his wife's like, well, are you actually going to physically train? He's like, nah, I'm a Titan. Yeah. I don't need to train. And that definitely comes to bite him in the butt. Long story short, well, actually not really a long story, great short story. He got tired very early.
Yeah, no, and he set himself up for a rough time immediately.
And I do love how he highlighted that when you're climbing, the last person to get to the stopping point, that's when everyone gets up and starts climbing again. They're just waiting to regroup and keep climbing.
Yeah.
And so he was always the last one. So as soon as he would get there, everyone's done resting and he doesn't get to rest. So it's just kind of snowballing this just fatigue. And at one point, another climber has to carry his bag, and it was funny.
Yeah, the whole thing is him slowly coming to grips with the fact that he is gonna struggle throughout this, because according to how he told it, every single time there was 5 breaks, and every single one he was the last one there, so he did not get to take a break. Everyone else did and was sitting there waiting for him. He would get there, they'd all pack up and they'd start walking.
Yeah,
and the guides not so subtly implied that he should turn around at one point. There was the point of no return. Well, it's not, you will return, but there's a turn back point. Other than that, you're going to the top. And one of the guides was strongly suggesting that he turn back around. And he's like, no, I'm going to finish this thing. And I have to admit, the guy was dedicated to finishing this mountain.
He finished it. He did finish it.
Yeah. And so he was dedicated to doing it. He was decided to do it. And also it also reminds me, when they were talking about who this guy is, he's a lawyer that teaches at UConn, and then also is kind of earth-centered. So he does these long retreats and things like that, where they're completely silent. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I actually talked to somebody I was talking to for my other show. He talked about a retreat like this, where they did a mountain hike, and I think it was 5 miles. It was 5 hours, and you were hiking, and you were not allowed to speak. You would just walk and be in nature and say nothing. And I think it has a lot to do with mindfulness, just being,
I feel like I need that
just
so
being
bad right
in
now.
your situation and not doing anything to fill, just being in that moment.
Just being.
Yeah. And so this guy is involved in all of these types of things. And to me, as soon as you say kind of like a meditating hippie-ish, and I don't consider hippie like a negative thing, but he just has some of those vibes. And then at the same time, he's a very established lawyer that teaches at UConn, which is not some random little school. It's UConn. Like, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so this is that guy that is climbing this mountain and struggling the whole time. And he does eventually make it, but yeah, he loses his dignity along the way. He had to, and not exactly, because these hikers all probably were like, wow, this guy was just full of it. Because he also talked about when he was first getting started on it, he was like, I'm going to go feel out some of these people. I'm going to figure out where my place in the pecking order is. And so a group of them, it was 5 guys from Boston who literally cut a guy from their group because he wasn't hitting milestones for this hike.
Yeah. And they're training during their like pre-training for this hike.
Yeah. And there was one guy who was a triathlon runner. There was
someone who had done this multiple times and had done Mount Rainier, which was his next stepping stone, was to do Mount Rainier. But yeah, it was.
But basically it all just came down to me, dedication, being humbled, and then also just people being there along the way they helped him even when he was being kind of obstinate about it. They were there to help him.
One of the things that they picked out later on in the episode where they kind of broke down the story and highlighted some of the great choices that he made, and maybe things that he could have done to make the story even better. I really liked how he started at the foot of the mountain. His story started at the foot of the mountain, even though he goes back and he talks about kind of preparing for the trip. He didn't start there, even though that would have been chronologically correct. Mm-hmm. He started his story at the foot of the mountain right before they start, because you kind of, where it's going, that it's a mountain climbing story, and you kind of like, okay, wonder what's going to happen on this climb. So he kind of grabs you right there, and then he colors like the background. So I really liked that, and I liked how they like brought that up, as well as they brought another thing up. What was some of the stuff that they brought up that you noticed? That
they brought up about his like trying to tweak his story?
Mm-hmm. Well, things that they highlighted that he did well, or things that he could have done a little bit better.
Yeah, no, I mean, he really is interesting in how he thinks, because he mentioned, don't act like this is a life or death situation.
That's the one I was trying to remember.
Because you can't make those the stakes, because it wasn't. You're alive.
He was saying,
there's no actual stakes.
Storytellers should never tell a story about themselves that has, a life and death part of the story.
Unless you die.
I guess unless you die.
You're right up until that point.
I'm a ghost.
See, that's the twist that nobody's expecting. Wait, no, we all are now because of The Sixth Sense.
So that was the story of I Am Titan by Chris Kriesen. It's a great story. I really liked them being able to break the story down and stuff like that. And now I kind of want to discuss story in general and the power of it and storytelling.
Yeah, there was a lot of interesting stuff about that on here, because since this was there, and that's the cool thing about being the pilot, is they have a lot more setup for the show in general, kind of straight up setup, where they tell you how this is going to play out and what's going to happen. So they mentioned who would want to become a better storyteller, mm-hmm. who would want that as part of their skill set. And then he goes on to say pretty much anybody. It can be for a wide variety of reasons. There's a lot of impact that you can have by becoming a better storyteller. He talked about teachers, and he talked about people in business, and he talked about parents,
preachers, rabbis,
just kind of whoever.
Yeah, I mean, when we met Cal Fussman, he was doing that kind of stuff, teaching companies how to tell their stories better. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it has a lot to do with marketing. I mean, if you've got a compelling story for your product or your book or whatever you're trying to sell, it helps people to engage more with that thing.
See, that's the thing. I think that being a good storyteller is just being engaging enough when you talk that people want to listen. They mm-hmm. want to know the next thing you're going to say. And that's something that is going to go a long way in a lot of different situations.
Yeah. And I don't know. I really want to do one of his workshops, as well as I am going to get his book. I almost bought it today, but I didn't have enough time to do it. But I am going to get the book because he said it's basically everything he does in those workshops, but in a book form, along with some stories. So I want to become a better storyteller myself, and maybe you'll be able to see me be a better podcaster because I'm a better storyteller as we go along. Because there's another thing. You might be a better podcaster if you're a good storyteller.
I definitely could see that, because some of the great podcasts are exactly that. Snap Judgment, Ira Glass, same thing. There's a lot of these people that are very effective storytellers, and it makes their podcast so you want to listen through the whole thing.
Yeah. And one of the things he mentioned at the beginning of the show, which he mentions every other show as well at the beginning, is he has this thing that he does, and I want to start this. And it's very simple, and it's I've heard someone else talk about something similar, but I don't remember who it was. But he does something that he calls homework for life. And essentially, at the end of his day, every single day, he has an Excel sheet, and he will just write down, okay, June 12th, this and this and this happened. And this, he tries to find something that would be a good story later on. I don't think he writes the whole story out. He just writes kind of a memory and kind of like a little time capsule, so that if he ever wants to write a story around it, he can.
Yeah, he does it in a giant Excel spreadsheet, and it's just he can look at it, look down the whole list of. Yeah, it's like fragments, random thoughts, random things that happen that'll just like pique his memory.
Yeah, the one that he was mentioning that day was that one of his students, because he was an elementary school teacher, they got him to do a back bend, and he thought it was impossible that he would be able to do that. And it was such a simple little thing, but I can see a good story of something you thought was impossible being possible in such a short period of time, because you had people that believed in you and told you to keep doing it and try. And it's just it's a simple little experience that he had that day. But I really would like to see I think it would help you to see things as they're happening a lot differently. You know what I mean?
It does. And it also, I think that it's right there on the edge of mindfulness too. Because you're much more aware, and it's beyond aware. It's like acutely engaged to situations, because you're looking, you're searching for things. And when he was talking about this, it made me think of the only other person I've heard of that, and I'm sure other people do it, but the one that immediately made me think of was Robert Rodriguez, the director. Is the most fanatical chronicler I've ever heard of in my life. Literally, at the end of the day, he writes his whole day down in his journal, and he can go back. He has it dated. He has an organization system. And so if you're like, hey, do you remember when we talked last time? You mentioned something, but I can't remember what it was. He looks it up. He 100% looks it up. And so he's like friends with Quentin Tarantino. And so he like recorded some of their conversations. So if he had a question about something they were talking about, he can show him a video. And so that kind of recall on top of the mindfulness and being inside of a moment and really being present in it. And then also you have kind of a chronicle of all of this.
Yeah. So I definitely want to put that into practice. And I've listened to multiple episodes, some of the newer ones, some of the older ones. And it is funny because he's always a little bit trying to get his wife to do it because she hasn't done it. She doesn't do the homework for life.
Yeah.
He's like, have you done it yet? This is like episode like 40 something. And he's like, have you done it yet? She's like, no, not yet. I'm sure I will one day. He's like, you really should have changed your life. He says that every single time.
I can believe it. Because you are looking more.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's probably a great thing to end the day as well. Right before bed, right before you read a book or something, just take a minute. You can do it on your phone. Do it on like OneNote. Yeah. I have OneNote. I probably would do it there. Write a little thing. Be like, today, a bird pooped on me and it was one of the first times a bird pooped on me, and I think I had really good luck the rest of the day. So maybe that's a true thing, that you have good luck if a bird poops on you.
Wait, did that happen to you?
Nope, but it would be a good story if it did. I don't know what my thing today would be at all. So what would your thing today be? Because I don't know. I worked.
I don't know.
Things broke. I had to fix.
Yeah, it was hot outside.
Today was hot.
Yeah.
It's the end of story. See, we're not good storytellers yet. No, we need to learn.
Not yet. I need to dig deeper. So the last thing that I really thought was interesting about just this entire premise, because both of us definitely appreciate story, and we both have done writing. You know, I don't know where Florida Man's at right now, but one day he's going to resurface. It's just, there's a lot going on right now in the world, and Florida Man,
I don't know. He's
off. But we both appreciate it. And he told this story about 4 separate times. He told a very personal story. He told something on stage and he didn't even really talk about what it was. So I guess it seemed like it wasn't something that he really wanted to just broadcast on the podcast even. So it's a deeply personal story. And he said that 4 different times when he's talked about it, people have come up to him and told him about their miscarriages. Yeah. And like one of the darkest times in their lives that they hadn't shared with
anyone else,
pretty much anybody. And it made me just think that that's the reason why pretty much anybody could get involved in storytelling, is because I think it's just connection. I think that for thousands of years, humanity, before there was written language, before there was history, before there was anything like that, there was storytelling. There was songs. There was just communication. And so that's the cool thing about this, and it's something that you see kind of highlighted in it, is it's just kind of that human communication. And so it makes it cool.
Yeah, actually, I was listening to a later episode today, and he told a story about how he got in a car wreck during this snowstorm, and he was driving a Datsun and whatever, blah, blah, blah. You know, he told a story about the car wreck and how it was really bad. And after that story was told in Connecticut to a live audience, someone came up to me. He's like, I was in a wreck during that same snowstorm on that same road, and I was driving a Datsun as well. It was like crazy. You know, of course, the other guy was driving like a sports car, and he was driving the crappy version of it.
Okay, yeah, he was driving a janky Datsun.
Yeah, but it was still like, what are the odds, you know, that someone was in the same snowstorm, same, you know, strip of road, and gets in a wreck as well. I guess it was like one of those giant pileups where a bunch of cars get wrecked.
So a bunch of people got stuck on the road?
Yeah, apparently that guy's car got stuck, and then when they plowed the snow the next day, his car got cut in half because it was like under the snow, and the plow just ran through.
Who knew that was even a risk?
Yeah, we're in Florida. I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently it is. But yeah, I mean, the connections that you can make in storytelling it's powerful, man. I think that it's a powerful tool. I really do.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's a really great podcast. Everyone should check it out. Even the episode we talked about, we told you the basics of the story. If you really want to get the full experience, listening to him tell the story is better.
Oh yeah,
because
for sure. He's a good storyteller.
Yeah, and he's not trying to essentially summarize. He's telling a story, and so it's really good. It's a really great show to listen to, and that brings me to a recommendation I have for next week, and it is storytelling based. So this show is by the New York Times, and it is called Rabbit Hole. And this show, I'll read you their slug.
I'm excited.
What is the internet doing to us? The Times tech columnist Kevin Roose discovers what happens when our lives move more online. So this show follows one guy who is radicalized by the internet. And that's all. I mean, literally shows them his entire search history for the past 5 years. And they break down all of it. And it talks a lot about the technology involved. It talks a lot about his living situation and kind of his culture and what was happening around. It's seriously, I listened to the first episode of it and I ended up just kind of blasting through 3.
Yeah. So I was trying to talk him into recommending all of them, but
it's 8 episodes now. I don't know if that's the end of the story, because I would guess they might do like little anthologies.
Because I will probably blast through all of these in like a few days.
Yeah.
And I'm excited because you told me about it, and I don't know. I mean, we're just in this weird time of echo chambers and just, you can find a justification for almost anything on the internet, and things are usually like thrown at you. I mean, you don't even have to search for it. A lot of times, as long as the internet has figured you out, it will give you, and they're like, look, I'm right. See, it's right here. This is the first thing that came up. Obviously, it's what's going on.
Well, buckle up because you're going to love this show.
Oh, I mean, it's probably going to be scary more than anything. It's just kind of like...
It is in a way. It is in a way.
Yeah.
Because, I won't spoil it. Seriously, awesome show. I listened to the first episode and I listened to 3 episodes.
All right, so this is Rabbit Hole?
It's called Rabbit Hole. And we're doing episodes 1, Wonderland, and 2, Looking Down.
Okay, so the first 2 episodes of Rabbit Hole. All right. I'm excited.
Me too. I'm going to listen to the whole rest of the show probably.
And remember,
there's always more to discover. Thank you for listening to the Podcast Discovery Show. We have a few things we'd like to tell you. First, we would love to hear from you on Twitter at the PDS Official or in our Facebook group, the Podcast Discovery Club.
Secondly, leaving a rating or review on iTunes helps tremendously in giving us visibility and also visibility to the podcast that we recommend. You can also check out our Patreon page to get exclusive bloopers, old episode archives, and other exclusive content while supporting the show.
Finally, seriously, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you about what you love about podcasts. And thank you for being a part of all of the things that we do.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.